Hello everybody and welcome to another video, and today I am kind of excited and a little bit disappointed because I'm going to be looking at the new track from Paradise Lost. This was released close to the beginning of this month, and they released their new track with an official music video, but I cannot find the official music video anywhere. Because every single link that I find to it says the YouTube channel associated with this video has been terminated. So I cannot actually find a copy of the official music video anywhere. So we're going to end up watching, well, I say watching, we're going to end up with a version which is just the little CD cover in the bottom corner of the screen. So it's a little bit disappointing because I would have liked to have seen, you know, the official music video. But anyway, it's the music that's the important part. So, of course, we're going to be looking at the new Paradise Lost track today, as I mentioned, called Silent Like a Grave. Now, Paradise Lost has been one of the most consistent bands that I've ever had the fortune to listen to. You know, I think I've mentioned before, Paradise Lost was the first ever band that I saw live. It was the first ever gig I went to, and it was 1998 in the Shepherd's Bush Empire in London. It was the 1 Second tour. It was just after the 1 Second album came out, or it might have been just before, I can't remember. Anyway, it was around about the time 1 Second came out, you know. And, like I say, first ever gig I went to, I was 18 at the time. And it was fantastic. You know, first ever show, Paradise Lost. Fucking outstanding. It was a brilliant gig. So, and, you know, I've always enjoyed Paradise Lost. You know, even before going to see them in 1998, you know, I heard tracks like Ember's Fire, Widow, As I Die, you know, all the classics, you know, they were played on, and I've mentioned this before, they were played on Headbangers Ball on MTV, back when MTV used to actually play music, you know, and I think I even covered one of them. Well, you know, I did a birthday marathon of videos, and I think Paradise Lost was one of the ones that I did, you know, because I was talking about, you know, when I used to watch Headbangers Ball on MTV, you know, because my brother would record it on a Sunday night, I think it was, and then throughout the week before we went to school, we'd put in the video cassette and watch it before we went off to school, you know. And like I said, Paradise Lost has been one of those bands that I've been listening to since pretty much I got into heavy metal. And they have always been consistently good. You know, they started out with a really sort of dark, deep, sort of death metal gothic sound. You know, when you look at albums like Gothic and Lost Paradise, you know, they had that really dark death metal sort of sound. And over the years, their style changed considerably. You know, from things like Gothic and Lost Paradise, you moved into things like Draconian Times, which I'm not going to say it got a bit lighter, but the vocal style changed quite considerably. You know, it wasn't all death metal growls. You know, there were some clean vocals in there. And then you move on to things like Symbol of Life and Host. You know, Host being the biggest departure from their original sound. You know, because originally, you know, Gothic, Lost Paradise, dark death metal sound. Host pretty much sounded like Depeche Mode. And the thing is, it was still a great album. Their music has been consistently great through every iteration that they've been through. You know, obviously, Nick Holmes and Gregor McIntosh went on to do a side project called Host. And I think I actually covered a track of theirs on here a little while ago, and it was still great, you know. So, you know, Paradise Lost has been a consistently great band. So, you know, I'm expecting a lot from this track. So yeah, I'm really excited, really looking forward to this, because obviously when they went through things like Host, they sort of hit Host and then they sort of started changing the style back, and then they came to The Plague Within and they started bringing back elements of their older sound. You know, they still had the cleaner vocals that they had from albums like Symbol of Life, but you know, they started bringing the harsh vocals in again, which they hadn't done for quite some time. You know, so as soon as Plague Within came in, you know, they've done several albums since then. They've sort of merged their original old style with their sort of cleaner new style that they had. So, you know, they've always been great, but they've experimented, and it always seemed to have worked. I can't name a bad album. So I'm looking forward to this. I'm expecting it to probably be their sort of newer style. Maybe they've altered it a bit. I'm not entirely sure. They might have put a little bit of flair into it to differentiate it from things like The Plague Within and is it Medusa, and things like that since then. So that they might have put a new sort of spin on it. I'm not sure, but either way, I'm still looking forward to it because, like I say, Paradise Lost have been a mainstay in my musical library for years. I have lyrics here, and I'm hoping they're accurate. They come from underneath the YouTube video I'm going to be using. Like I said, it's just the album cover, so we're not getting a music video. But I'm looking forward to this because it's Paradise Lost. So, yeah. I'm just waffling on and talking absolute bollocks at the minute, so I'm just going to jump into this and see what we've got. But before we do that, if you could take a moment to like and subscribe if you haven't already, it would really, really mean the world to me. I've been doing this for close to 7 years now, and as it stands, not even 3% of people watching my videos are actually subscribed. So, if you could like and subscribe, it would really, really mean the world to me. It doesn't cost you anything. It takes a fraction of a second, but it does make the biggest difference to me and to the channel. But anyway, without any further ado, let's jump into this track and see what we've got. So this is Silence Like the Grave by Paradise Lost. Let's have a look. Nice. Excellent. It's a great song. What can I say? I expected as much from Paradise Lost, really, because, like I say, over all of the years that they've been active, over all of the albums that they've released, and I have every single one of them, they have been consistently great. Like I said, I don't think I could name a bad album by them. Most bands you can turn around and go, there is one turkey out of the entire lot. There might be some albums that I don't prefer as much, but I can't say that there's a specific album I don't like. And even my favourite bands, like My Dying Bride, there is an album by them that I don't like, which is 32.788% complete. Megadeth, again, one of my favourite bands. Like, that was my gateway band, a band that got me into heavy metal. There is an album of theirs that I'm not particularly over fond of, and I can't remember the name of it. The World Needs a Hero? Yeah, wasn't particularly keen on that album. But with Paradise Lost, every album they have released has been brilliant. I've never hated a single one of their albums. Even with Host, which was quite a departure from the Paradise Lost that I grew up with, it was still a brilliant album. It was still brilliantly executed. It was a fantastic album. So, I was kind of expecting more great things to come from Paradise Lost, and they didn't disappoint. And this falls into their... Well, I mean, it seems obvious. This falls into their newer style. Because, like, back in the days of things like Shades of God, Icon, Gothic, Lost Paradise, they were almost entirely harsh vocals. Every now and then you'd get a little clean bit. And then, after that you went into things like Draconian Times, where you had songs like Forever Failure, one of my absolute all-time favourite Paradise Lost songs. I actually refer to it as my theme song. That was an entirely cleanly vocaled song. Draconian Times onwards, things changed. You came into 1 Second, and that had, if I remember correctly, that had no harsh vocals in it at all. And then, you had things like Symbol of Life, you had Host. There is another album in there, and I can never remember the name of the album. It's one with all the bees on the front. I can never remember the name of the album, but, there's that one as well. But as soon as they came along with The Plague Within, they started bringing in elements that were very reminiscent of albums like Icon and Shades of God. Nick Holmes was bringing back the harsh, growled vocal, and it was something I was very grateful for, because whilst I did like all of their albums, I did miss the old Paradise Lost. But as I said, all of the albums were still good. So as soon as they came out with Plague Within and they brought back those harsh vocals, it was fucking amazing, and they've released several albums since then. And this sounds very much like it could have been a B-side from The Plague Within, because there's the clean vocal in there, then there's the harsh vocal in the chorus. And, Nick Holmes hasn't lost his touch with his ability to perform those vocals. But the thing above all of it is, you could have played me that song with absolutely no vocals over it at all, and I could still tell you that it was Paradise Lost, because there is a very specific sound to Paradise Lost. There's a way that they structure their music, and above all, there is a specific sound in the guitars that makes it, undeniably Paradise Lost. There is that guitar tone, excuse me, it's unmistakable. As soon as you hear that guitar tone, you know that it's Paradise Lost, because I can't think of another band that sounds like that. No, I can't think of another band that has that sound and that style of play. It's not solely the sound. There is something about the structure, the way that it's played, that gives it away. So, you can tell this is quintessential Paradise Lost. And, it's a great, great piece of music. I really, really like it. As for the meaning, I actually got too caught up in the actual song itself to actually pay that much attention to what the lyrics were saying.
It says, the thrall invade in the dead of night. The dark machine is what you need to fear. Beyond the veil of the barren skies, controlling weakness as growing bleakness tests you. So the thrall invade in the dead of night. The dark machine is what you need to fear. So, beyond the veil of the barren skies, controlling weakness as growing bleakness tests you. Is that just? Is he just talking about the bleakness of existence there? Maybe, because it's often in like the dead of night when depressive and anxious thoughts tend to be able to get to you the most. That's when the thrall of these thoughts invade. The dark machine is what you need to fear again, because things like depression are often referred to as the black dog, a dark cloud, a dark machine. That could be the world at large in general. It could be just the population of the world. It could be things like the governments, for example, the machine. Controlling weakness, again, this is one of those things with things like depression and stuff like that. It's a controlling thing, and it makes you feel weak and makes it easier to control you with that sort of mindset. And growing bleakness tests you. Again, the increasing depression, the increasing misery, it tests your resolve. It's sort of, are you up to this task sort of thing. Is that what it's talking about? I don't know. Then it goes into the chorus, which is, of course, where he brings in the harsher vocals. And he goes, with silence like the grave, a fury will prevail. Preach to all like a prophet Preach to all like a prophet from long dead tales. So with silence like the grave, so, from silence, a fury will prevail. So is that suggesting, like, that with depression and misery comes a certain degree of silence, because you sort of fold in on yourself, you sort of close in on yourself, and you sort of shut yourself off from the rest of the world, a fury will prevail. So is that like, burst free from this misery, and depression, a fury will prevail. You can fight against this misery. I don't know. I could be miles off. I really don't know. Preach like a prophet from long dead tales. I'm not sure why I keep adding extra words in there, but I'm not entirely sure what that line could be. Anyway, the tortured face in a damaged life, a thought serene is what you dream to fear. Of all the lowliest parasites, devouring freedom, then cowering with no virtue. Interesting. So, the tortured face in a damaged life. Again, that could be like talking about someone who is suffering and struggling with mental health issues, depression, that sort of thing. Tortured face in a damaged life. A thought serene is what you dream to fear. So, is you dream to fear a serene thought? So is it like you want a peaceful life, so you want a life so peaceful that something serene is the most terrible thing you'll ever encounter? You're not necessarily scared to have a serene life, but you want your life to be so simple that serenity seems almost scary. Maybe serenity is scary. You're so scared of living a happy life, maybe, because you're so used to living in a tortured manner. I don't know. I'm not really sure about that. Of all the lowliest parasites, devouring freedom, then cowering with no virtue. So, the lowliest parasites devouring freedom, again, that could be talking about mental health, that could be talking about things like depression, the black dog, as it were. People could consider it a parasite because it infects you. It devours your freedom. Of course, it could also be talking about things like the population of the world, because there are people who seek to control you, and they are literally parasites. They will bleed you dry as much as they can, take whatever they want from you, take your freedoms away from you, and, then carrying with no virtue. They'll take whatever they want and then go and hide away, They've got no virtue, they've got no morals, they've got no scruples. You know, they're cowards. Could that be what they're talking about? I don't know. You know, look, like I said, this could be talking about mental health. It could be talking about depression, misery, that sort of thing, which is not an uncommon theme for the band. But they could also be talking about the fact that the world at large, or the population at large, seem to be out to suck all the fun and enjoyment out of life. They want, you know, people like governments and such like that. They seek to control you, tell you what you can and cannot do, what you can and cannot enjoy, you know, and basically trying to control your life. And the people who do this are hypocrites and liars. You know, they have no virtue, you know, but they're doing their best to control you and take everything they can from you. You know, so it could be talking about the world itself, life itself, you know, being this sort of parasitic thing that's trying to take all joy out of your life. Or they could just be talking about depression, mental health, I don't know. And it goes into that chorus again. A silence like the grave, a cruelty will prevail. The chorus changed here. Because originally it says, with silence like the grave, a fury will prevail. But here it says, a silence like the grave, a cruelty will prevail. Preach to all from the top of the world, then fail. The look from weary eyes, the horrors of disease, leaving all of humanity on its knees. So this sort of, again, leans more towards the world and existence being the thing, the black shroud that's encroaching upon your life, that's enveloping you and making you miserable. Maybe not so much the things like depression and anxiety, although that could still be applied. So a cruelty will prevail. Again, that could be talking about things like the one percenters of the world who think that they have control over you because they have more money than you. You know, preach to all from the top of the world, then fail. Again, this could be likened to the government. Certain countries will go unmentioned, but UK is one of them, where like the government say, oh yes, we're going to tell you this, that and the other, we're going to promise you this, that and the other, we're going to feed you all of this bullshit, we're going to basically lie to you, and we're going to do everything we can to take everything from you whilst we sit in our ivory towers, you know, chewing on caviar from gold-plated spoons. I know you're not supposed to eat caviar from gold-plated spoons, but you know what I mean. You know, but then they fail because they fail to live up to their word. They fail at basically being decent human beings. They fail to deliver on everything. You know, they are just worthless human beings, and they're just taking advantage of the population at large. You know, make the poor pay more whilst us rich people don't have to pay anything, even though really we can afford to. The look from weary eyes, the horrors of disease, leaving all of humanity on its knees. So again, this could be, you know, just talking about life in general. It could be talking about the upper echelons of the social ladder, as it were, or it could be talking about depression, misery. It could be all of the things. It could be none of the things. I'm not entirely sure. But then it goes and repeats the chorus again, but goes back to the original one. A silence like the grave, a fury will prevail. Preaching to all like a prophet from long dead tales, look from weary eyes, a longing for relief. Excuse me. Leaving all of humanity on its knees. And that's it. So, whether it's talking about life, existence being a cruel, dominating force that basically sucks all enjoyment out of existence, whether it's talking about, you know, society that's doing that, or whether it's talking about mental health issues, I'm not entirely certain. But there is this overwhelming sense that it's talking about something in the world that is dark, oppressive, and trying to control you, you know, basically trying to make your life as miserable as possible. So, yeah, I think that's what it's talking about. I could be completely wrong. I'm not entirely sure. But regardless of that fact, it is still an excellent track. You know, musically it sounds great, as you would expect. Again, you know, Paradise Lost have been consistently excellent
in their production values. You know, the music has always sounded good. The vocal performances have always sounded good. Like I said, I cannot think of a single bad album by the band. So, you know, I was excited for this, and rightly so, because it was a great piece of music. And I don't know what else I can say on it. So, yeah. I think I'm going to have to leave that as it is. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like or a subscribe. If you haven't already, it really, really means the world to me. You know, I've been doing this for about 7 years at this point, and not even 3% of people watching my videos are actually subscribed, which is a little bit disappointing because, you know, I put a lot of time and effort into what I do. I try to do a bit of research into every artist and song that I look at, you know, and I like to do something, I think, that's a little bit different than most other reactors. You know, most reactors will look at a piece of music and go, yes, I like it, or no, I didn't like it, and that's normally about all you'll get. But I like to actually react to the song. I like to talk about the song, the music, what it means, what are the stories, the morals and themes within the piece of music. You know, I like to talk about the lyrics. What are the band trying to express in their lyrics? What message are they trying to send out? You know, does the song mean to me the same as it means to you? You know, and I want to have that discussion. I want to talk about the song. I want to react to the song. And that's why I do things the way I do things. And, you know, I thought people might actually enjoy that, you know, because rather than watching somebody sit there, listen to a piece of music for 5 minutes and half the time massively overreacting, you know, because you get these people and, you know, they'll put on a piece of music and they'll be like, a heavy breakdown or a heavy chug, and they'll go, you know, as if something amazingly profound just happened. And it's like, that's not how people react. That is an overreaction. You know, you're taking the piss. It's not genuine. You know, I want to be as genuine and honest in my opinions as I am. You know, even if it's a band, even if it's a band I like, and I don't particularly like that song, I will say so. You know, I will give an honest opinion about a piece of music. You know, there are bands that I've checked out on here that, you know, bands that I like, and they've put out a piece of music and I've gone, do you know what? Actually, not that good. You know, I always try to be honest in what I do. I don't try and over-dramatise things. You know, people might actually enjoy that ridiculously overacted reaction, but that's not me. I want to take music seriously. I want to talk about music. I want to have a conversation about it. And that's why I do what I do. So, you know, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like or a subscribe if you haven't already. It would really, really mean the world to me. It doesn't cost you anything. It takes a fraction of a second, but it does make the biggest difference to me and to the channel. But yeah, that's about all I've got for you for this video. Thank you all very, very much for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.